The chilling truth of existence under Slaanesh starts with melodies that ought to remain silent. I recall the days when our planet Kixis Prime stood as a beacon of elegance. These days, I observe nobles cheering as performers draw blood from their hands, their expressions twisted in rapture. The pieces become ever more intricate with each passing week. The crowds develop an insatiable craving. I sense the transformation within myself as well. My perceptions intensify. Hues blaze more vividly. Noises pierce more sharply. The summons arrive the day before, inscribed on heated vellum that throbbed faintly against my touch. They label it the infinite coil. They claim it shatters every limit of feeling. What they omit, and what I'm just starting to grasp, is that each melody nourishes an immense, ravenous entity lurking below our polished corridors, a presence that has lingered, eager for our summons to draw it forth. I recall the initial alterations in the music. They arrived not abruptly, but through faint shifts detectable only by those attuned to nuance. Back then, I was Lucenvar, successor to Housevar, supporter of 100 creative collectives across Kixis Prime. We took pride in our sophisticated tastes. Our realm was destined to shine as the sector's gem, a haven where grace thrived against the indifferent expanse of the cosmos. The change unfolded slowly. Fresh works incorporated jarring tones that echoed excessively, statues with forms that unsettled the gaze yet pulled it inward, fragrances evoking spring blooms yet carrying a subtle metallic tang on the palate. We dubbed it progress. We hailed it as art's advancement. Our ignorance was profound. I was present at the debut of the Infinite Coil in the Grand Harmonic Hall. Elra Viston, the composer I had unearthed from the Undercity's shadows, had long tested limits with her sounds, but this fresh opus vowed to eclipse them altogether. Elites from 3 landmasses vied for seats. The Emperor's planetary overseer occupied the Imperial enclosure, his stare remote and hazy. I ponder today whether he sensed the corruption overtaking our sphere. The ensemble comprised 300 players. The choir boasted 500 singers. As they launched into the score, a force stirred deep within me. The strains didn't merely reach my hearing, they seeped through my flesh, vibrated in my skeleton, surged through my sinews in a blend of agony and bliss. I clung to my chair's supports as the rhythm quickened. With the chords turning denser, more insistent, I overlooked the initial signs of hemorrhage, the cellist in the 3rd tier, her digits blurring over the frets until they tore apart. She persisted, countenance alight with joy, as scarlet flecks scattered from her grip with every draw of the strings. When the work hit its peak, nearly half the ensemble bore comparable marks of sacrifice for the sake of the score. The spectators offered no cries of dismay. We clapped until our hands ached. That evening signaled the onset, though I failed to see it at the time. How could I have? My upbringing revered allure in every guise. I learned that creative output represented humankind's noblest pursuit. I trusted the imperial doctrine allowed such endeavors beside loyalty to the God Emperor. I erred on all counts. Come dawn, I inspected my palms. They stung from the fervor of clapping, tender under contact. I traced the satin bedding with my fingers and recoiled at the surge of feeling. All sensations amplified, more urgent. Shades appeared more luminous. Auditory layers gained richness. Meals revealed subtler tastes, nuances previously unnoticed. My attendant brought the morning meal. Marin had tended my lineage for 20 years, his visage, as known to me as my reflection. Still, I scrutinized his traits as though encountering them afresh, the minor offset of his left eye above the right, the faint web of marks tracing his chin from an early ailment, the emerging quiver in his right grip, particulars I'd ignored before now compelled focus. "Quote Na'ar?" he inquired, placing the platter. "The show from last evening," I replied. "Have you caught any whispers?" Marin's look altered imperceptibly. "Whispers circulate below stairs, my lord. Some speak of the players being carted to medical centers post-performance. Others insist they declined aid." "Declined? For what reason?" Marin paused. "They insisted no harm had come to them, my lord. Against all proof," I acknowledged, sending him away with a gesture. As the portal shut, I grasped my data tablet to scan the arts broadcasts. They brimmed with critiques of the prior night's event, Reviewers termed it revelatory and mind-shifting. A few proclaimed it the dawn of a fresh creative era on Kix's Prime. Not one referenced the gore. In the ensuing weeks, I joined 17 additional recitals. Each displayed akin traits, scores that ventured past conventional consonants into domains that brain specialists might deem pie. It began with a critique of excess that somehow twisted around to revelry, artists who endured bodily strain, even peril, in pursuit of their craft, crowds becoming ever more voracious for raw thrills at every show. An invite arrived, scrawled on what looked like aged vellum, yet oddly heated under my fingers. The ornate lettering summoned me to a private assembly of genuine devotees, orchestrated by Elra Vistain in person. The spot wasn't the Grand Harmonic Hall or any familiar spot, but a spot in the forsaken indulgence zones, districts long out of vogue since the ecclesiarchy tightened its hold on society decades back. I ought to have alerted the Adeptus Arbites. I ought to have spotted the hints of something illicit sprouting up. But instead, excitement surged through my veins. I'd long viewed myself as a pioneer in cultural trends. I convinced myself this was just another step forward. On the evening of the event, I waved off my standard guards. I donned evening wear, though with tweaks that strayed from typical aristocratic norms. A coat with an uneven hem, footwear sporting heels a touch too bold for propriety, a scent mixed with faint notes that stirred unease beneath the alluring aroma. Unbeknownst to me, I was already shifting, tuning into fresh perceptions subconsciously. The structure was a dilapidated playhouse, its exterior eroding from disuse. As I drew near, though, the wear showed odd designs, crafting a deliberate allure in the ruin. No sign marked the door, save for a faint emblem carved into the foundation stone. Back then, its meaning escaped me. These days, it haunts my every thought. Within, the venue had been reborn. Chairs were gone, leaving a sprawling empty area. Drapes cloaked the walls, altering hues with every shift in perspective. The atmosphere hung heavy with fragrances that nudged my mind askew, as if thoughts meandered past barriers like streams evading rocks. And the attendees, scores of them, glided about in manners that upended usual decorum. A few swayed to faint melodies I could scarcely detect. Groups formed rings, lids shut, bodies rocking together. Certain souls pursued pursuits that eluded clear grasp from my spot by the threshold. A lady neared me, her features partly hidden by an intricate visor, but her stride and head's angle gave her away. "Composer Vistain," I murmured, inclining my head. Patron, indeed. Her tone echoed her compositions, tones that lingered in unforeseen corners. I pondered if you'd attend. Your summons piqued my curiosity. "Not my doing," she clarified. "I'm just the guide steering powers beyond my grasp. Follow me. There's a figure you need to encounter." She guided me amid the throng, gazes tracking our path. I knew plenty of faces, peers from elite artistic and noble sets, yet strangers mingled in too, folks barred from my regular soirees, laborers from the underdecks, troops meant to be at posts, even cowled presences advancing with the exactitude of the Adeptus Mechanicus. We arrived at a partitioned nook, shielded by thick cloth from the larger room. Elra swept aside the dense material, exposing a compact ring of sitters. In the midst, an apparatus I couldn't place at first. It evoked a stringed device with echo boxes, but its makeup defied acoustic logic. Maybe skeletal remains, human? Gems glowing from within, alloy parts that twitched unaided. "Our latest breakthrough," Elra declared. "A tool that performs the performer, flipping the script. Revulsion should have gripped me. I should have detected the blasphemy in her words, yet I bent closer, drawn in. "What's the mechanism?" A fellow in the group raised his gaze. His eyes were veined in red, pupils expanded to eclipse the whites entirely. "Via union," he replied. His digits ended in ragged, bloodied nubs, nails ripped free. Still, bliss lit his face like profound ecstasy. It reveals the authentic harmony, the melody underpinning every tune. "Care to give it a go?" Elra inquired. After a fleeting pause, I agreed with a nod. They cleared a place for me among them. The contraption sat positioned ahead, and directions came to rest my palms at designated spots. The osseous parts felt heated, the alloys chilled, the jewels humming at a pitch that set my molars buzzing. "Now yield to it," Elra breathed close to my side. "Allow entry." I complied. "Emperor, absolve me." I bared my psyche fully. The feeling started soft, akin to remote strains borne on breezes. Then it swelled, surging via my hands, along my limbs, flooding my torso. My pulse realigned to its cadence, my breaths aligned with its pace. With eyes sealed, visions emerged behind them, shapes assembling, shades I'd never. I recalled geometries defying all logic, and underlying it all, a voice that conveyed not words but raw feeling. It offered promises, experiences surpassing the limits of any human neural architecture, insights into cosmic resonances linking distant stars, delights that dissolved the boundary between rapture and oblivion. I'm unsure of the duration I stayed linked to the device. Upon reopening my eyes at last, the assembly had shifted dramatically. The facade of an artistic affair had dissolved entirely. What unfolded before me could only be termed adoration. Not the solemn ceremonies of the imperial faith, but a feral, unrestrained fervor. Figures twisted into shapes both exquisite and terrifying. Chants rose in tongues no mortal larynx could form. The atmosphere warped near select individuals, their outlines turning liquid and ever-shifting. Elra observed me closely, her mask discarded. Her features retained their allure, yet bore faint alterations hinting at augmentations far exceeding mere vanity procedures. Her grin exposed incisors sharpened to edges. "Quote 1, she murmured. Quote 2, quote 3 vris. My tone felt alien even to myself. Quote 4. Elra extended her hand, tracing my jawline with her fingers. That touch ignited jolts of agonizing bliss surging through my nerves. Quote 5. I ought to have rejected it. I ought to have escaped. I ought to have alerted the officials to it all. Yet I inquired. Quote. Her smile broadened. Quote 7. That occurred 3 years back, a span in which Kixis Prime evolved from a haven of sophisticated arts into an entity the Imperium would brand heretical upon discovery of its essence. 3 years in which I enabled the Meister's reach to permeate every stratum of local civilization. 3 years in which I surrendered myself gradually, tone by tone, fragment by fragment, to the melody without cessation. Yet the Maestra has yet to appear in full. She lingers as a sensed but invisible force, a director whose wand guides us from beyond a shroud of existence. But shortly, imminently, the magnificent recital shall commence, the one to rend that shroud away. I document this as both admission and alert, though I realize none shall encounter it before it's hopelessly delayed. I am no longer the individual I once was. I've morphed into something greater and lesser than humanity. A conduit for intensities no flesh was intended to withstand, a lone tone within an orchestra of indulgence, and may the God Emperor absolve me. For all that I've turned into, I still deem it exquisite. The summons to the core group arrived once I'd coordinated 7 prominent recitals throughout Kixis Prime. Crowds swelled with each successive event. Boundaries of conventional creativity stretched ever further into domains once dismissed as lunacy. Attendees surfaced transformed, their outlooks reshaped, their cravings sharpening into precise and insistent forms. The Adeptus Arbits had taken note naturally. 3 of my gatherings faced incursions. Yet whenever enforcers stormed inside, arms raised and cries of deviance echoing, their weapons soon dropped, their rigid faces easing as the harmonies enveloped them. A few merged into the throng, while others withdrew, submitting accounts so ambiguous and inconsistent that investigations stalled. Those impervious to the Maestra's pull vanished. I never probed their fates, though at times I imagined catching their echoes woven into select pieces, protests warped into harmonies of transcendent yielding. The core assembled in the remnants of the planetary governor's winter residence. The governor dwelled there indefinitely, though he no longer wielded authority in any real capacity. His form functioned as a repository for impressions demanding neural rewiring past baseline human tolerances. I would occasionally call on him, observing his gaze invert in ecstasy as waves of feeling flooded him, his lips shaping phrases in dialects I was just starting to grasp. Elra now commanded the core, her evolution all but finalized. Her epidermis gleamed with iridescent sheen, cycling through delicate shades per gesture. Her speech carried overtones capable of evoking anything from immobilizing euphoria to wild mania as she willed. In motion, she trailed subtle echoes as though the fabric of reality labored to fix her in one spot. "The Maestra is satisfied," she informed us amid the gathering in the repurposed Grand Hall. The area had been refashioned into her termed sensation vault, its surfaces clad in substances crafted to amplify and redirect acoustics in precise. The chamber featured intricate acoustic designs. Its flooring incorporated rare alloys that channeled resonances attuned to the human skeleton's frequencies. The atmosphere passed through advanced purifiers that infused subtle minerals to amplify neural responses. 12 individuals formed our core group, ex-aristocrats, creators, tactical leaders, and even a bureaucrat from the Administrum whose database privileges had been crucial in pinpointing people with unique perceptual traits. Each of us had undergone a personal metamorphosis. Mine had centered on my hands, which stretched longer, with extra joints enabling me to produce unearthly tunes on standard devices. The flesh grew almost translucent, exposing the web of sinews and channels below, all throbbing in rhythm to harmonies audible solely to me. "The major recital draws near," Elra went on. "The event that will let the Maestra emerge completely into our world. Yet before that, we need to ready the spectators." She signaled, and attendants presented 12 goblets. The contents swirled independently, at times resembling vintage, at others a denser, murkier essence. "Consume it," she ordered, and glimpsed the route ahead. I raised the vessel to my mouth without pause. The fluid scorched as it descended, then chilled in my gut, before shifting into a state beyond any sensation of heat or cold. My awareness splintered. I existed at once in the great hall and scattered across myriad sights on Kixis Prime. I perceived via endless gazes, sensed through vast arrays of sensations, each capturing varied aspects of an unfolding orchestral wave. I witnessed laborers in factories operating with flawless synchronization, their efforts elevated to orchestrated ceremonies. I observed youths in learning chants that reshaped their budding minds. I viewed temple clerics whose addresses now wove rhythms that paid homage to the god emperor outwardly while redirecting reverence inwardly to another force. And I glimpsed the voids amid existence where an entity lurked, one with excessive appendages that glided with unearthly elegance, its sound, a fusion of allure and dread. The Maestra remained unfinished in our plane, yet it gained power through every rite enacted in its honor. Upon regaining full awareness in the hall, Elra resumed her words, detailing the scheme she termed the Concordance, a unified global spectacle engaging all inhabitants of Kixis Prime by choice or compulsion. Communication networks adapted to relay precise tones, hydration sources dosed with agents to heighten vulnerability, satellite arrays realigned into formations that eroded the divides between worlds. "You each handle a segment," she declared. "Lucan, yours, centers on the primary auditorium, the tangible nexus for the Maestra's arrival." I inclined my head in assent, overwhelmed with reverence. My mind belonged no longer to myself, my essence diminished to a conduit for the Maestra's desires. Still, a remnant of my former being lingered, observing remotely, crying out mutely amid barriers of rapturous feelings. That remnant intensified over the ensuing days as I directed the setup of the harmonic convergence space. The old Grand Harmonic Hall had been enlarged, its framework modified using relics both archaic and forbidden. The platform rose from remains of those whose brain patterns clashed with the Maestra's sway. The sound baffles integrated treated hides, tensioned to vibrate at targeted pitches. The chairs formed helical layouts that traced icons discernible only from on high. While crews implemented these changes, a portion of me started to doubt our pursuits, not from fresh allegiance to the Imperium, but from mounting unease regarding the Maestra's genuine aims. The bliss it offered brought escalating agony. The splendor it unveiled carried undertones of fright. The alterations it granted felt more like devouring than ascension. One evening, long after the crew departed, I stood solitary on the platform in the chamber. My modified fingers grazed the skeletal framework, sensing tremors that coursed along my limbs and into my core. I shut my eyes and, for the initial time in months, attempted to recall my prior existence. Lucenvar, supporter of expressions that exalted human essence undiluted. A figure who valued elegance without surrendering his core to it. Experiencing uncertainties, my former ally. I spun to see Marvin Cale emerging from the dimness, previously the head of the world's guard units, now the martial branch of our sect. His change had diverged from my path. His epidermis had toughened into a chitinous layer, undulating with hues that mirrored his inner moods. Right now, those hues twisted into designs that signaled distrust and looming danger. No uncertainties, I told myself falsely, just making sure all aligns with the Maestra's expectations. Naturally, he stepped nearer, the clacking of his reshaped feet resounding through the vacant hall. It's normal to feel daunted as we near enlightenment. The mortal brain grapples with grasping the splendor on the horizon. Yes, I averted my gaze, feigning interest in the conductor's stand. The harmony will be flawless. It has to be. His palm landed on my shoulder, the contact unsettling as the chitinous segments released a subtle venom that prickled my flesh. A single flaw, a trace of doubt, might spell ruin for everyone involved. The warning hung heavy. I was under scrutiny. Any hint of faltering devotion would reach Elra and the core group. I twisted my features into a mask of ecstatic eagerness, a look I'd once felt truly not long ago. My existence is devoted solely to the orchestra, I declared, the rote words spilling out automatically. Marvin eyed me for another beat, then inclined his head. We all share that purpose. Press on with your tasks, Lucan. The Maestra is ever attentive. Once he departed, I stayed rooted, pondering my predicament. I was entrenched at the core of what I now saw as a disorderly sect. I'd aided its expansion over a whole planet. I'd perpetrated horrors under the banner of creativity and thrill. No atonement awaited me, no pardon from the God Emperor for my sins. Still, a spark within resisted the destiny we were forging. Not from morality, since I'd forsaken that ages back, but from an emerging realization that we weren't evolving into superior entities. We were being devoured measure by measure, fragment by fragment, to birth a presence that regarded us merely as fodder. The alignment was set to commence in 3 days. 3 days when countless inhabitants would assume their roles in a global ensemble of body and feeling. 3 days before the Maestra would completely emerge, ripping apart the barrier between worlds to seize the planet she'd nurtured via our efforts. 3 days where I could maybe devise a method to sabotage the composition. I realized I couldn't halt it completely. The sect had permeated too deeply, corrupting vast swaths of planetary authority and culture. But I might inject a jarring tone, a break in the meticulously tuned melodies, insufficient to rescue Kixis Prime, yet possibly adequate to notify the broader Imperium of the events here. Enough to guarantee that the eventual cleansing would be absolute, denying the Maestra any remnants to seize. With that notion, this minor defiance of the influence that had dominated me for years, I sensed a fracture in my psyche, a split in the barrier of ecstasy that had rendered me passive and obedient. Agony surged through my modified fingers, along my limbs, piercing my torso. I dropped to my knees amid the platform, wheezing as awareness flooded back in painful shards. Emperor, deliver me. What monster had I turned into? What abomination had I assisted in building? I compelled myself upright, striding firmly from the room as though unaltered. Within, I started scheming, not for redemption, but for demolition. It was the sole contribution remaining to me. The following day, I carried out my responsibilities unchanged on the surface. I oversaw the last tweaks to the resonance alignment vault. I joined the elite group's pre-event ceremonies. I permitted Elra to refine my transformed hands more, stifling cries as she reshaped tissue and sinew, sans pain relief, molding me into a finer tool. Throughout, I observed and heeded with sharper focus than in ages. I cataloged the guard measures, the placement of sect guardians, the timeline for the alignment ceremony. I pinpointed vulnerable spots, instances where interference could yield the greatest chaos. The strategy that emerged was reckless and imperfect. I had entry to the primary audio relay network, the mechanical core that would coordinate the displays planet-wide. Through targeted alterations, I could potentially embed tones that conflicted with the ones meant to erode the divides between realms. Not sufficient to block the Maestra's arrival, but maybe enough to render her form shaky, exposed. I'd perish, undoubtedly. Even if fortune favored me somehow, the elite would dismantle me for the treachery. Yet my end was sealed from the instant I'd first grasped that blasphemous device long ago. The only thing of import now was the purpose I could assign it. On the eve of the alignment, I acted. The main relay center occupied the former private watchtower of the planetary leader, a spire commanding views of the metropolis. Guards were thick but accustomed to me. I invoked end-stage checks, vital tunings that demanded the exactness of my adapted grasp alone. They let me through without a single query. The deference they displayed churned my gut. I'd gained their confidence over countless years of unwavering loyalty to the rot at the core. Within the central node, I operated swiftly. The setup was intricate, blending conventional Empire tech with tweaks shaped by the Maestra's demands. As overseer, I'd pored over every detail, grasping its workings down to the bone. My extended digits danced over the panels, tweaking the signal tuners with delicate shifts to the transmission rhythms. I was almost done when I felt someone nearby. Pivoting, I saw Elra observing, her iridescent hide shimmering softly in the hub's low glow. "Interesting tweaks you're applying, Lucan," she remarked, her tone laced with those eerie overtones that set my spine jangling. "These aren't in our outlined protocols." I stood tall, dropping all facades. The Maestra isn't granting elevation. She's reaping us, devouring us whole. "Surely you've noticed, Elra." She cocked her head in that strangely robotic way. "Naturally, she's absorbing us. That's the supreme merging, the flawless bond between devotee and divine, to dissolve into her, merging with her timeless melody." She glided nearer, sleek and menacing. "I figured you'd grasped this. I assumed you'd welcomed it." "I was deceived," I replied, lured by thrills I confused for true insight. Yet now I recognize the reality of our creation, not uplift, but obliteration. How narrow a view. Her arm lashed out with inhuman speed, clamping around my neck. There's no real divide between uplift and destruction. Each demands the cessation of your present self. I fought her hold, stunned by the power far beyond what her frame implied. My modified claws raked her limb, spilling fluid that gleamed in alien hues. "The alignment will advance on schedule," she stated, her features mere breaths from my own. "The sole uncertainty is if you'll join eagerly, revered for aiding this splendid shift, or merely as fodder, one more wail in the Maestra's entry chorus." Right then, it hit me. I'd never truly had a shot at interference. The alterations I'd input to the relay network were swiftly undoing themselves via self-correcting mechanisms detecting the anomaly. My minor uprising had been foreseen, maybe even staged as the ultimate loyalty trial. Elra let go, and I crumpled to the ground, wheezing. "Why spare me?" I choked out. "The Maestra reserves a unique role for you, former ally. Your attunement to her symphony, that delicate neural web of yours, your spot at the epicenter of the resonance core. You'll serve as her mouthpiece, the corporeal conduit for her initial address to this fresh realm." Elra's grin stretched past mortal bounds. "Isn't that the distinction you've chased through all these cycles?" The dread surging through me was total. Not mere demise, but something far more dire. To remain aware as my essence dissolved, my form hijacked to channel the entity we'd adored. To witness as the Maestra wielded me to extend her reach from Kixis Prime across distant planets. "Tomorrow you'll assume your station at the Maestro's stand," Elra declared. "You'll initiate the recital precisely as drilled, and at the pivotal instant, you'll yield utterly." She started to depart, then halted. "Devotees will guide you to your rooms and stay vigilant until the alignment commences, for your safety, naturally." Once she'd gone, sect guardians stepped into the hub. They managed me with cautious reverence, like tending a prized yet breakable tool. They led me to my suite in the ex-governor's residence, posted sentries beyond my entrance. Solitary, I slumped on my bunk's rim, hopelessness crashing over me. I'd botched it. Come dawn, I'd morph into a fiend's herald, my core absorbed into its being, and Kix's prime would tumble utterly, reshaped into a realm of perceptual nightmares, a cradle for decay destined to infect adjacent sectors. Amid the gloom, my fingers stirred independently, tracing soundless tunes on phantom keys. A reflex honed through seasons of reshaping. I observed their motion, the eerie grace from excess hinges, the sheer epidermis exposing the elaborate lattice below, hands reforged expressly to lead the concordance's prelude, to marshal the world's ensemble in flawless harmony. And right there, I glimpsed my last recourse, not to halt the Mestra's advent, as that was sealed, not to redeem Kix's prime, already forfeit, but maybe, only maybe, to guarantee that tomorrow's manifestation bore flaws, imperfections open to the Empire's inevitable reprisal. I examined my court opulence, worthy of my rank within the sect enveloped me. Nestled among the opulent decor stood a modest altar dedicated to the Maestra, adorned with a crystal figurine that roughly captured her imagined shape. Its jagged contours suited my intentions ideally. I drew near the altar, dropping to my knees in apparent devotion. The sentries beyond the door would anticipate such reverence on the night preceding the convergence. With measured precision, I grasped the figurine, gauging its heft and the keenness of its facets. Without pause, I smashed it forcefully onto my left palm. The torment was sublime, a cascade of suffering as the crystal fractured bone and sliced through the intricate neural clusters that Elra had meticulously nurtured. Crimson spilled forth, gleaming with eerie hues. I clenched my teeth to suppress my cry, savoring the metallic tang mingled with an odd effervescence on my tongue, akin to illicit enhancers. Before numbness could overtake me, I inflicted the same on my right hand. The follow-up blow intensified the anguish, with nerves already aflame from the initial wound. This time, the noise that broke free was uncontainable, though I twisted it into what could pass for fervent adoration. I slumped next to the altar, my mangled hands outstretched, gore spreading across the lavish tiling. The custom augmentations lay irreparably damaged. Devoid of them, I couldn't perform my intended role. Absent flawless channeling, the convergence would prove imperfect. The Maestra would arrive nonetheless, yet possibly in a manifestation more volatile, less equipped to project her reach past our cursed realm. The entrance flew wide. Sentries surged inside, roused by the clamor or maybe some intuitive sense of my treachery. Their faces morphed from worry to revulsion upon beholding my handiwork. Quote 10. One barked. They gripped me roughly, heedless of my wounds, hauling me from the altar. My lifeblood streaked the gleaming surface, each spot laced with remnants of the enhancements that had rendered me indispensable to the sect. I chuckled as they bore me off, the laughter as fractured as my extremities. I'd woven in my jarring element after all, not via machinery, but via self-inflicted ruin. The convergence would unfold, yet lacking its chosen orchestrator, sans the ideal conduit the Maestra had groomed over years. It amounted to scant resistance, truly feeble, but it represented the sole atonement I could muster for my part in birthing this horror. They conveyed me to a vault far below the citadel, a domain of agony and metamorphosis where the sect's biosculptors plied their blasphemous crafts. Elra awaited there, her visage blending rage and intrigue. Quote 11. She remarked while they bound me to a surgical slab. Quote 12. I countered, my words faint from suffering yet resolute in intent. Quote 13. She signaled, and a silhouette emerged from the gloom. I dimly recalled him, a lesser aristocrat who'd aligned with our sect in its nascent phase. His alterations were subtle, inward directed rather than outward. Vith has mastered your methods. His palms bear initial tweaks already. Come dawn, he'll assume your duties. My brief surge of rebellion crumbled into fresh hopelessness. Naturally, they possessed reserves, substitutes, fail-safes. The Maestra's designs wouldn't falter so readily. But you, Lucan, Elra pressed on, retain a purpose, not as orchestrator certainly, but as tool. She inclined her head toward the biosculptors encircling the slab. Ready him. The blueprint has shifted, but his neural framework stays superior. The maestra will find him useful yet. What ensued defied words in its cruelty. They operated sans numbing agents, claiming torment would sustain vital synaptic routes. They retrieved fragments of my tailored enhancements, redirecting them for alternate uses. They integrated fresh components sourced from coerced captives dragged into the vault. Throughout, awareness persisted, my howls fading to moans, then to a remote scrutiny of my remaking. I sensed my essence eroding, the self once known as Lucan splintering amid the barrage of torment and grotesque overhaul. Still, a kernel endured, observing my evolution. At first light, I bore no resemblance to before. My demolished hands were excised completely, supplanted by extensions evoking sonic emitters over mortal appendages. My chest had been splayed open, skeletal frame reshaped into an echoing cavity. My larynx was reworked, duplicated, primed to emit overtones beyond human capacity. I had morphed into a viable device, crafted to perform amid the convergence, not the leader I'd been destined for, but a tailored piece in the world's symphony, a conduit for precise tones that they believed the ritual would rip open the barrier separating realms. As the sun crested above the sprawling metropolis, they carried me into the resonance hall for the grand alignment. From my vantage, I caught sight of throngs of people streaming to their assigned spots for the global symphony. A few strode with determination, eager devotees of the sect that had infiltrated all strata of life. The rest shuffled unnaturally, their forms hijacked by the contaminant, laced into the streams, crops, and breezes alike. Within the hall, the elite cadre assembled on the platform. Elra dominated the middle, her shape so altered she scarcely evoked humanity anymore. Flanking her was Vareth, his palms crudely retooled to mimic what my own had become. Imperfect, yet serviceable for the ordeal to come. They placed me near the platform's brink with the other biocrafted tools forged for the show. Once ordinary folks, now remolded into specialized sound generators. I spotted familiar faces among them, old allies and competitors from my time supporting authentic creativity. Reduced just as I was to mere pieces in the Mestra's vast scheme, the spectators packed the space. Thousands of the Order's fiercest adherents, their eagerness hung thick, a mental weight that set the atmosphere humming. Plenty bore marks of alteration, tweaks both intentional and abrupt, as the divide between worlds grew fragile. Elra spoke to them, her tones laced with those unearthly overtones that resonated deep in muscle and skeleton. The instant draws near. The harmony ignites. The Mestra arrives. Vareth stepped to the director's stand. His motions missed the seamless poise I once commanded, but he lifted his altered grip with sufficient accuracy. Across the globe, I sensed fellow leaders echoing him, readying the worldwide ensemble of tissue and feeling. The opening tones arose, not from traditional tools, but from the vital ones arrayed on stage. A female figure, her chest reworked into a flute-like device, unleashed a tone that twisted through the space, wrapping listeners and drawing shivers of eagerness. A male whose backbone had been turned into a drum set was hammered by custom strikers. His cries of torment morphed into steady beats that laid the show's groundwork. Next came my moment. Elra advanced on me, her mutated fingers lingering above the contraption that used to be my frame. Her contact blended tenderness with torment, igniting neural nodes tailored precisely for this. I sensed vibrations surging out of me, compelled through the echo cavities that supplanted my essentials, bursting from outlets that had formerly been my lips, sinuses, and auditory canals. The emission wasn't melody in the way I'd known it. It was raw feeling rendered as waves. The entirety of my past, my shifts, my slow decay, all condensed into pitches meant to erode the fabric of existence. With every vibration pulled from me, my awareness splintered more. Pieces of self dissolved in the rush of noise, but that resilient kernel endured. The perceiver, the recorder, the sliver still naming itself Lucanvar. It held fast amid the sensory storm. Observing via gaze organs no longer wholly mine. As the alignment built, the hall's sound dynamics boosted and molded our emissions, channeling them to the platform's heart. There, a zone stood ready, inscribed with glyphs from unknown substances. As the display escalated, that zone shifted. The atmosphere flickered, then wavered, then split like cloth rent by invisible forces. From the rift, an entity started to appear. Not fully, not abruptly. Initial wisps of audible form materialized, snaking via the interdimensional gap. They explored the hall, brushing spectators who groaned at the touch, their frames bending toward it. The wisps bulked up, took on weight, shifted from vibration to solidity, yet somehow stayed dual-natured. Hues poured in next, bursting through the breach, shades beyond our palate, ones no mortal sight should grasp. They cascaded over the platform, gathering near the biotools, infiltrating us via dermis and apertures. Whether innate or imposed, wherever they grazed, tissue evolved anew, turning fluid, more pliant. The crowd's fervor peaked. Some dropped prostrate in reverence, others clawed at garments and flesh, yielding to the force steadily revealing itself. A few more warped on their own, forms reknitting under the entity's nearness, the idol they'd exalted. All the while, the display pressed on. Varith Khan conducting the melody with growing assurance as the maestra's sway deepened his bond to the score. Elra darted among the animated tools, fine-tuning, amplifying, drawing out peak performance as the instant of full emergence neared. I sensed the maestra's gaze locking onto me alone, a scrutiny that pierced past my bodily shell, past the scattered awareness that lingered, searching out the spark of defiance that drove me to maim my fingers. I attempted to guard that final fragment of my being, to conceal the observer who still gazed in dread at our handiwork. Yet her perception was far too sharp, too all-encompassing. "I recognize you, Lucenvar." The phrase materialized straight in my thoughts, skipping over hearing I had long since lost. It echoed with tones of mirth, of regard for my minor uprising, of eagerness for the unfolding events. Your defiance lends flavor to your ultimate yielding. The discord you aim to inject simply enriches the closing accord. Floods of visions overwhelmed my mind. Glimpses of Kix's Prime's fate beneath her rule. Towers of organic tissue erupting from the ground. Their design, a violation of logic and the laws of nature. Parades of altered inhabitants taking part in worship ceremonies that devoured them, measure by measure, fragment by fragment, their vital force pulled into the expanding essence of the maestra. The world's safeguards refitted to transmit the planet's metamorphosis throughout the sector. A alluring melody luring the inquisitive, the thrill chasers, the ripe for corruption. And in the midst of it, my remnants, not slain, denied even that release, kept alive as the maestra's mouthpiece, the conduit for spreading her reach past this lone planet, aware just enough to behold the fallout from what I'd aided in forging, yet helpless to alter the composition I now fueled. The terror of such a destiny could have shattered me utterly, if not for an outside force stepping in. A fresh noise clashing against the meticulously arranged show. A shriek that sliced through the resonances of the alignment like a blade through tissue, alert sirens blaring across the palace. The recital stumbled. Vith's focus shattered, his fingers halting in mid-motion. Elra whirled toward the room's doorway, her altered visage twisting in a blend of fury and incredulity. "Unthinkable," she snarled, the term laced with overtones of real dread. We'd crushed every opposition. We'd mastered all controls. The room's portals flew open. Shapes stormed in, but not the sex guards as I'd anticipated. These donned suits of deep indigo, their headgear topped with pale ridges, storm bolters and energy blades primed for action. They pressed into the space in flawless array. Trailing them were additional fighters. These clad in the ebony plate of the Death Watch, experts in battling the extraterrestrial and infernal among the Emperor's elite. The Imperium's top warriors inexplicably on Kixis Prime, mysteriously infiltrating the core of our order right at the peak of the Maestra's arrival. Their arrival was no fluke, their intrusion no accident. An informant had alerted them, guided them to this spot exactly when the barrier across planes hung thinnest, when the Maestra stood most exposed during her shift between realms. Elra shrieked, the cry demolishing the glass ornaments across the space. Quote 18. The vital tools, including myself, remained compelled to comply. Melody erupted from us with fresh vigor, pushing toward the rift in existence where the Maestra's incomplete shape continued to gather. The crowd rushed at the Space Marines, a wave of tainted tissue and zealous fervor. Explosive projectiles met them, ripping apart mutated forms. The Astartes pushed forward steadily, hardened by endless clashes with the archenemy and its minions. They'd arrived equipped, their strategies exact, their mission unyielding. Yet they faced odds of thousands against a handful, and as seconds ticked by, the Maestra's emergence advanced, her might swelling, her command over the room's physical rules intensifying. Astartes stumbled as weight warped beneath them, as noise solidified to block progress, as hues sapped vigor from augmented sinews. The artifact. One broadcast over the Vox, his words piercing the uproar. Unleash it immediately or the chance slips away. A Deathwatch Astartes moved ahead, a contraption cradled in his armored grip, nothing like prior designs I'd encountered, no standard armament, an object thrumming with an opposing energy, vibrations warring with ours. A counterforce, engineered expressly to oppose the resonances of the Maestra's summoning. He triggered it at the room's edge. The impact struck instantly and ruinously. The melody from the vital tools warped, bent, it folded inward on itself. The vibrant shades pouring from the rift fractured into shards, their otherworldly tones disintegrating into basic wavelengths. The rift started to shrink, the weave of existence mending its own structure. The Maestra's essence pulled away, her extensions retreating from the material realm. Her half-formed shape lost its unity, melting back into the symphony of noise and light that had shaped it. No, this isn't the end. It's just a pause. Her ideas whipped across my awareness, surging into the thoughts of every devotee in the room, fury blended with vow. I will come back for my due, everything you hold, everything you could evolve into, set aside for my timeless orchestra. The rift sealed shut with a noise beyond mere loudness, transforming into raw shockwave power. It hurled every soul in the room to the floor, soldiers and followers indistinguishable in the chaos. We, the vital tools, including me, sensed a severance from our altered forms, untainted by pain. The custom alterations, the vibrating cores, the noise-generating limbs, all went dead, severed from the intent that had driven them. In the quiet that ensued, I discovered motion was possible. Not smoothly, not fully, but sufficiently to swivel the remnants of my skull toward the Space Marines, who were now rising and pressing forward through the hall. Elra loomed ahead of them, her mutated frame still imposing, despite the Maestra's retreat. "This alters nothing," she growled, echoes of resonance clinging to her tone. "The show has started. It won't halt, only postpone. The Maestra has claimed this planet. She will return." Quote 19, replied the Marine carrying the forbidden artifact. He lifted off his helmet, exposing a visage worn far beyond his bodily age, gaze hardened by atrocities seen over ages of duty. Beside him stood an Ordomo Malleolus Inquisitor, his rigid countenance implying zero room for compassion. But you'll miss the spectacle. What came next was slaughter, not combat. The followers resisted naturally. Warriors among them clashed head-on with the Marines. Those gifted with mental powers tried to twist the Marines' loyalties inward. Beasts of pure bodily change charged as animated battering rams. It proved futile. The Space Marines arrived ready for all possibilities, their dealings with Chaos Sects clear in their precise countermeasures. The hall turned into a slaughter pit. Explosive shells and energized blades shredded the elite group into mangled heaps of tainted meat. Elra endured until nearly the end, her evolved physique demanding efforts from 3 Marines to bring it down at last. Her parting utterance wasn't rebellion or plea, but a string of tones, a snippet of the Maestra's composition, upheld and broadcast in her final exhale. Once it concluded, with the hall littered only with cadavers and fading zealots, the Inquisitor neared my ruins. His look betrayed no revulsion or sympathy as he inspected the abomination my frame had twisted into. "This one's still breathing," he observed, "and seems aware, unless I'm wrong." The Marine leader stepped up, a piece in their ceremony, formerly mortal, heavily reworked, now ended like the rest. The Inquisitor scrutinized me closer, observing aspects of my changes, likely identifying the dedicated role I'd been retooled for. No, this could yield useful knowledge. The taint here delves further than our first evaluation. The alert we got was spot on, yet partial. Alert, that term reverberated in my splintered mind. An insider had alerted them. An ally had summoned the Imperium's fury to Kixis Prime right at our weakest hour. The Inquisitor appeared to catch the query in my surviving gaze. Indeed, a tip came our way. A signal sent on channels the Inquisition scans for warp disturbances, basic yet potent. It outlined the sect's schemes, the schedule for this alignment, the exact resonances to deploy. His chin dipped a touch. It broadcast from this exact room just hours prior to our strike, routed via the identical network designed to align your blasphemous concert. Realization dawned in my fractured thoughts, my botched effort to tamper with the network. Elra had spotted me, stopped me from injecting clashing tones into the alignment, unaware I'd achieved something different. A frantic broadcast crafted amid tweaking the controls, a revelation and alert fired off at random into the ether on bands I figured would draw eyes from warp watchers. I hadn't botched it entirely. In truth, my quiet uprising had yielded surprising results. "Take it," the Inquisitor ordered. "Our experts will assess." They sought to glean whatever scraps of knowledge might be salvaged. Then came the rituals of absolution. As the naval servitors hoisted the remnants of my form, a quiet fulfillment washed over me. Not forgiveness, impossible for the atrocities I had committed, the realm I had aided in tainting, but maybe a sliver of reparation. The Maestra's complete emergence had been thwarted. The Imperium now knew of the blight afflicting Kixis Prime. The unavoidable reckoning loomed, scouring with flames whatever eluded gentler remedies. In the ensuing weeks, I grasped the scale of the Emperor's reprisal. 3 chapters of Space Marines had orchestrated the incursion on Kixis Prime, hitting vital sites in unison throughout the world. The cult's tendrils had burrowed deeper than I ever imagined, ensnaring almost 90% of the inhabitants. The Inquisition judged the planet irredeemable. They drew out every detail from remnants like myself, reconstructing the sect's origins, tactics, and links to distant sectors. They pinpointed pathways of taint stretching past Kixis Prime, sending operatives to probe and quarantine budding infections before they could flourish. And at last, once all vital data was secured, they enacted the ultimate purge. From the void above, virus bombs rained down, ravaging the surface and annihilating every living cell, eradicating the Maestra's stain from the poisoned biosphere. I observed the catastrophe via prosthetic optics fitted by the Inquisition's flesh sculptors. My mind held in a bespoke survival pod, not from compassion, but due to my deep familiarity with the cult's rites, rendering me briefly useful. I aided in spotting hidden markers of decay, detecting unique resonances signaling the Maestra's sway, decoding the morphic processes the followers had wielded. Once my role concluded, I braced for termination. Yet the interrogator proposed another path. "Your essence defies salvation," he stated flatly, devoid of condemnation. "Yet your ordeals hold worth. Entities akin to the one you followed lurk elsewhere, twisting souls via indulgence and overload. The Imperium safeguards archives on such perils. Your mind could enrich that lore." It wasn't existence as before, but a sustained persistence. My surviving flesh would linger in arcane stasis, my thoughts open to vetted inquisitors and savants. A test subject, a stark lesson, a fount of wisdom from the depravity I knew intimately. I agreed, naturally. The choice was this or nothingness, cessation of the observer I had turned into, and some shard of me yearned to atone, to offset even faintly the darkness I had fostered. They relocated my awareness to its permanent vault in a stronghold whose coordinates stayed secret from me. A sanctuary of prescribed lore and leashed perils, where the Imperium dissects its gravest foes. My biological relics floated in exotic solutions, linked to cybernetic ports granting cleared personnel entry to my recollections, my trials, my grasp of the Maestra and her arts. And so I endure, suspended between vitality and void, a mind extended past mortal limits, a chronicler of rot that persists in offering its chronicle. Ages have elapsed since Kixis Prime vanished in flames. The examiners who probe me today are far-removed heirs to the Inquisitor who decreed my upkeep. Inquiries shift with rising dangers as the Imperium refines its grasp of chaos. Yet my purpose endures unchanged. I embody recollection. I embody caution. I embody proof of how swiftly mortal strivings twist into heresy. How delight in aesthetics and thrill warps into veneration of the profane. I am the echo of Lucenvar, former steward of creativity, later thrall to decay, now a hybrid of flesh and forge. And in the lulls amid questionings, it echoes faintly, a subtle, undeniable residue of the Maestra's orchestration lingering in my altered neural web. Cadences that hint at her lingering presence in the warp, her vigilant anticipation for fresh soil, a society primed for subversion, a chance to incarnate anew. The melody doesn't cease. It evolves, reshapes, seeks novel vessels to sound, and I, who once led its opening strains, now stand as sentinel against the peril of chasing ecstasy into idolatry, of artistry devolving to apostasy, of splendor curdling to horror. Heed my narrative closely, those who delve into these annals. The composition plays on. With or without Kixis Prime, with or without Lucenvar, the Maestra and her ilk bide their time. Behind the shroud of existence, ever vigilant and timeless, they lie in wait for the vulnerable, the power-driven, or the merely curious soul yearning for wonders beyond the everyday. Heed this closely and hold it dear. In the shadowed age we endure, endless conflict reigns supreme. Yet, preceding the strife, preceding the taint, preceding the ruin, there lingers the melody. Enchanting and alluring, it whispers of ascension even as it unleashes perdition. The harmony endures without cease. Still, fortified by the fates of those who preceded you in defeat, perhaps you'll detect its first strains before doom descends. I am Lucenvar, once a benefactor, then a vessel, now a harbinger. And the refrain marches forward.